Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode, or the second part of an episode of Teaching Writing in College, where the driving question is, how can instructors in higher education leverage theory, science, pedagogy, and craft most effectively to help their learners with writing? This is the second part of episode 21. I want to really help students with citing sources, follow the penny principle. And just as a brief recap, last time in the first part of episode 21, we talked about teaching source citations and what do we do about teaching source citations. And I talked about a discussion on Facebook that I found, and what's the big deal with teaching citation styles. And the idea was to help students cite across context, or to use principles across context that would help them with various kinds of citation. And so I wanted to go into the second part of this and talk a little bit more about different things that I do in the classroom to help with this, some variety that I give to students, and so on and so forth. But as we were talking about, there is this idea of mindful abstraction where we have the deliberate, usually metacognitively guided and effortful decontextualization of a principle, main idea, strategy, or procedure, which then becomes a candidate for transfer. And once again, a shout out to Rhonda Thomas from Johns Hopkins University, where she did an entry on mindful abstraction for the encyclopedia I'm working on. But once again, the idea is just a couple of things that I think are really important when it comes to students' education here. One is that we're bouncing back and forth between deep structure, which is that mindful abstraction, this idea, the sort of the cognitive structure of a task, and the abstraction of it, and the surface structure, which is what we see on the page when it comes to writing. And if you think about it, the penny principle can help a student and me, for example, or anybody else bounce back and forth between an abstract idea of what source citation is and the way that it gets used practically in various circumstances. And those various circumstances will change, and so the way that the source or material gets cited will change. And so that's one thing that's really important here. Another thing that's really important is that I'm going to show some examples of material that I use in class to give students varied practice. And I have touched on varied practice before. I think I remember, maybe it was episode 13, I can't remember, but it was the one where I exercise. And varied practice is really important, where you take the same idea, the same skill, and you provide practice in lots of different ways for that same skill. And a couple of advantages I can think of off the top of my head when we do that is, one, it helps students gain some factual knowledge, especially in this case about source citations. It helps them gain factual knowledge about source citation, and then also it provides them with the practice that they need to see relationships between different aspects of citation. And then another one is just the repeated exposure. If you do interleaved practice, give them various kinds of practice over time and at various time intervals. So maybe do it once and then wait a week and do it again, and maybe wait 2 weeks the next time, or maybe do a couple back to back. That also helps with long-term memory. So there are lots of advantages for varied practice. And source citation isn't necessarily the thing that I like to emphasize the most in my courses, and I'm sure a lot of listeners feel the same way. It is important and it needs to be done. And I think the trouble sometimes can be that it's easy to get too caught up in the little details of citing sources and holding students accountable for whether or not they, put periods in the right places or used punctuation exactly the way they should have. And maybe sometimes it's a little more egregious than that. But as long as, students aren't omitting a lot of information, if the source can be findable, or if they're making attempts, those things to me are really important. But the other thing is that there are lots of other skills for writing as well, such as invention work or switching between genres, like we've talked about quite a bit on this podcast so far. Lots of other skills that need a lot of varied practice as well. But the one thing that I really like about using citing sources, at least to talk about this, is it's a really clear and concrete example of how one can do mindful abstraction of writing skills and take those into the classroom, and then also provide students with varied practice. And so to me, it's just a good example of how writing and teaching writing can work in the classroom. So I thought that would be helpful. But anyway, to get further back to the material that I did not talk about last time, teaching the penny principle across time. So the way that I like to do it, I've got lots of examples that I've developed that I would like to show. And when I do it, I like to do 5 minutes here and 10 minutes there sometimes. Sometimes it's a 30-minute workshop like the one that I introduced last time. It's mix and match. You can combine and vary. And so I've got just a bunch that I've gone through. It was a lot of fun to go through some past examples I've used at various stages in my career over the last several years. And in some cases, I'm remembering some of them, and in other cases, I use them all the time. But really, I think some great, at least for me, it was an opportunity to go in. It was a great opportunity to go in and see what I've been doing, and just to reflect on my own teaching, because that also is important. We just don't want students to reflect. We want to reflect also as teachers. And also just some, I forgot to mention here that some episodes, I planned this out and forgot about it, but it is about the concept, but it's also about practice and metacognition, and I've got some episodes that touch on that. So there was episode 12, short-circuiting AI with practice. I talked a bit about how important practice is, especially in this age of artificial intelligence, and our main concern, of course, is our students learning, and so practice can really help with that. Episode 13 that I was just talking about, varied practice with students over time. Episode 20 was the one that I just did previously. I can't remember the title of it right now, and I forgot to write it on the slide here, but that's all right. So I have here just a set of different things that I've done. Here's one. I'll start with this one, because one important thing I think about citing sources is that it's also kind of easy to get caught up in using one format or the other, like MLA or APA, which are, of course, probably very common in a lot of composition courses, a lot of writing courses. But here's one about AMA, the American Medical Association. And one thing I may have mentioned in the part 1 of episode 21 is that I like to have my students practice with formats that they might see elsewhere in their future. So if they are going to be a physical therapist, maybe there's a chance they will see the American Medical Association, or if they are going to be an engineer, they may see the IEEE format. And so we want to give them some varied practice. And I think here I have them make a generic model of an APA citation, it looks like, because I'm just having them practice. So I give them a real citation. I have them create a generic version of it. And then I have them make another one, because they've already done APA in my class by then. And so I have them practice that once with APA, and then I have them practice it once with AMA. So I give them another one of my citations, and I have them create a generic version of that, just so that they can practice using a different citation format, and so thereby also follow the penny principle. So that's kind of a fun one. And then what are some other citation formats you might use based on your major or future profession? And I have them look one up. Often by that time I'm probably done and I want to move on. I have a few other slides in here as well, it looks like. Looks like that's from something else, a little more contextual. I've forgotten the context for this last slide, but there's something there on APA and AMA and practicing both of those. Let's see, here is another one. This one is back to the APA format. And this one is about using or citing something from an app. It looks like there's a search here for Snapchat that I did. This is back, I think, in about 2015 I did this. And students were using Snapchat quite a bit. And I have this little scenario here. Here's what it says. Your classmate Harvey has a lot of trouble with citing sources using the APA format because he wants to cite a statement from about the app, Snapchat, I think, from the App Store or Google Play. He is a little confused. He has come to you for help. One day you receive the following email. Dear groupmates, I often have difficulties with the APA format. I want to use the description from the company that makes Snapchat, so Dr. Skeen keeps telling me that I need to do an in-text citation for the quote I used, but I didn't know you could even do that. Help, how are you citing your app? The quote I want to use is, they'll view it, laugh, and then the snap disappears from the screen unless they take a screenshot. And I have a screenshot from my phone that shows them this from the Apple App Store. Thanks, Harv. Please respond to Harvey by providing an example of a citation from a company's description of their app. Make sure your example is clear enough for him to understand, then summarize your process. Why did you make the choices you did? Decide what kinds of material a description of an app is. Hint, it's an electronic source of some kind, so I'm asking them about the genre there. Choose a resource that will provide you with models. The GCU Writing Center or the Purdue OWL might be helpful. Follow your chosen model to cite the text Harvey has provided you. Create a reference citation as well. And I didn't name the penny principle in here, so I wonder if I actually used this before I came up with the name, the penny principle. May have done, but you can see how that works. And I was using this in a unit on writing reviews. I was having them write a software review, and so this was kind of fitting in with that a little bit. Looks like also maybe before I was having them make their reviews look like real reviews instead of essays. But you can kind of see here, one thing I think that's fun about this is I can see trace the trajectory of my teaching, where I was slowly working my way toward different contexts, different genres, and things of that nature, and the penny principle as well. So I can kind of see that happening here. We'll see more about that a bit later. Let's see, what else have I got? Oh, one thing that I wanted to say, just back to the idea of citing sources. I do this a lot myself. I'm using the penny principle myself quite a bit right now. As I've said before, I'm editing an encyclopedia, co-editing an encyclopedia, and we're at the stage where we're putting the manuscript together. We've had the authors go through and use MLA 9, and so they've combed through it. Now it's our turn to comb through it. And it is very tedious work, and it has been a struggle for me to remember all of the tiny little details of the MLA format. And it's getting better as I go because I start to remember more each time I look at an entry. Here's an entry from me. I have an entry on the concept of fluency from cognitive psychology, and here's my works cited page. And I'm proofreading everybody else's too, but just remembering that it's very difficult, because I find mistakes in the contributors' entries. We've got, I think, at least over 70 contributors now, and they are experienced writers, experienced scholars, and they've done a great job combing through their own work. And then I'm just kind of a second set of eyes, and I still catch mistakes, and I have to be kind of careful and ask myself questions. And sometimes I find a problem, and sometimes I don't, but I'm continually asking myself questions about their works cited sections. And then I find little things sometimes. Sometimes, maybe somebody forgot to convert something from an APA format that they used originally to an MLA format, or to the MLA 9 format, And then to me, it just is a matter of trying to remember and continue to refer to the MLA handbook as I do that. But it's a lot of work. It is using the penny principle, and it's just so hard to remember all of it. The contributors have done a fantastic job. And I also know, just as a writer myself, an academic writer, that it is easy to make those mistakes and then kind of overlook them or forget. If you're working on a citation, there are so many little details that you might be filling one thing out and then something else occurs to you. And so you go back and work on that other thing and then forget to go back to the first thing that you were working on. I've caught myself doing that a lot. I see patterns of that sometimes in the entries that are in the manuscript for the encyclopedia now. But it's a lot of work. And so I like to give students some grace, and especially now going through this, I want to make sure that they are following the penny principle and that they are consistent, but I can also understand how tedious it is probably for them to try to get all of the material right, all of the citations right. And then it's a really easy thing to go and point out sometimes that there are mistakes, or at least we sometimes feel like we see mistakes, and then hold them responsible for those mistakes. But it is a very tedious process. That's why I like to kind of practice the penny principle with them in class, because then it gives them a feel for what to do, the process to follow, and it can help them be consistent and do their citations well when they are in their other classes. But it's a very tedious, difficult process. I was reminded of that earlier today, actually. Thought I would bring that into this episode a little bit. Okay, let's see what else have we got here. This one says reference citations practice. What is this one? Oh, so here, one thing sometimes I like to do, I like to use a metaphor, or not a metaphor, but I guess an analogy of music and learning music, because you get musicians and they know what practice is all about. I took my son to a music store to get a new violin string for his violin, and one of the things that the person that helped us said, he asked my son, what days do you practice on? And the answer, and then my son said, well, whatever days, he said. And then the person that was helping us said, you need to practice on, you only get to take a break on days that end in Y. I think that's the way that he put it. And practice is really important in music. It's important in writing as well. This one, just a good question to ask, what are the main components of a reference citation? And then I've got some samples here that looks like I must have taken them from, the GCU Writing Center online, the Grand Canyon University Writing Center has some materials, and I borrowed these citations from that. And I took them into class and just said, what seem to be some of those really important components? And so that's a really good question to ask, help them gain some factual knowledge. Why might you need more than just the URL when you cite something from the internet? This looks like it's a screenshot from the Purdue OWL, and there are some, let's see. Well, here's one from a newspaper, and so, once again, genre comes into play. Not everything is just a web page, and so we would have a discussion about that. Why don't professors want to see a reference list full of citations that are cited as if they came exclusively from the internet? So just I gave them just a quick thought exercise, a quick question about that, because I think I was seeing a lot of that probably in a class I was teaching. And so I probably put this PowerPoint together for that. So there's one, just different ways to practice for them. Let's see, use example of electronic genre practicing in-text citations. You can practice in-text citations as well. I don't know why that one's not coming up, but let me try this one, see if I've got stuff coming up here. I apologize for the wait on my computer. I'll have to do an episode sometime where I just sit down and show you how I put the podcast together. Oh, here we go. So here's one just about the layout. This one looks like it's a little bit older. This looks like APA 6 because it's got the running head at the top of every page. Oh, that other thing came up too. Okay. But sometimes just showing them kind of the overview, sometimes I'll have them draw. I'll put something like this up on the board and just have them do a mock-up of it by hand just so that they can see what's going on. And so just showing them things like that, doing activities like that would be really helpful. That's probably what I did with this, just to kind of show them, well, here's what the title page looks like, here's what the first page looks like, and the other pages thereafter, and so on. And sometimes I do have them do a mock-up by hand, so I may have done that with this one. Let's see, what is this? This one came up once again. Oh, okay, so this one I took the same sort of penny principle exercise that I often do with students to introduce them to the penny principle, and I applied it to in-text citations, I think, instead of reference citations. I also have another strategy that I've used to help students remember in-text citations is I did this body of a cat, and it's my own art work on the touch screen up on the front of in the front of the classroom at the podium. And I like to think of that in terms of heads, bodies, and tails. That an in-text citation has a head, where the source gets introduced. The body is the material that is being shared from the source, and then the tail is any follow-up information like page numbers or anything else that needs to go in there. And then I've got an example, a screenshot here of how the head, body, and tail can be different. So in the APA, for example, sometimes the tail, the last part, might just have the page number if you put the author's name in the head, or if you do some other ones. If you don't put the author's name in, then the tail is going to have the author's name, the year, and the page numbers, and so on and so forth. And you can do different things with heads, bodies, and tails, and so this is about that. And then I have them, do it kind of rhetorically. Like sometimes if you introduce the source a certain way, you can emphasize certain credentials. And I think I got this from I think the Writing Arguments textbook by Ramage, Bean, and Johnson may have been where I got that idea from, about how you introduce a source can help the audience perceive it in a certain way. And so we practice that with the penny principle. That's probably what I was doing here. So in-text citations, you can do stuff with the penny principle as well. Here's one with a real-world layout. So I wanted to get at that idea of genre, because the penny principle also applies outside classrooms, and I think that's really important as well. And so one thing I like to do with students, for example, in an assignment where they write a review, like a movie review or a software review or other kinds of reviews, I like to have them make it look real. And so I've got some contrast here between some real reviews and an academic layout on this slide, just to kind of show them the contrast. And I have them practice these different things with different projects. Like they might do one that's more classroom-based writing, and then they would make it look like a classroom-based piece of writing. But then when we practice real-world genres, we make it look like those real-world genres, and the penny principle can help with that. So what will you need to focus on to make your review look like a real-world one? So I just this is just a really brief one. It looks like, maybe a 5 to 10 minute one about the layout, which also can use the penny principle. Here's another one, not using a references page in a real world genre. Also really important. Okay, so this is one that I wanted to touch on too, because the penny principle, I'm going to skip toward the end here of this one. But one thing that I bring up with them is that when we practice real world writing, then in text or in any other way, if we're using the penny principle, we want it to make it look like real world writing. And in the real world, oftentimes especially if we're on the internet, we're going to encounter citations that can be tapped or clicked on, and then the source can be found. And so that's what's going on here. And so I would have students incorporate any kind of reference material that they use by turning it into a clickable link instead of, doing a citation, an academic citation, and doing an in-text and a reference section for each of those. Here it is again. Sometimes, I like to kind of poke fun at this idea, because I know sometimes students get just a little bit worried. They feel like it's uncomfortable to them because they've been often used to being held responsible for their source citations. And then when I go to a project like this, they get worried about, using links instead of including a works cited page or a reference page or something like that. And so I put lots of different emoji kinds of things from PowerPoint on here with question marks, and looks like one is an eye roll, and I've got this other one that's got some laughter with some tears and things. Another one that looks like it's scared. All of this I was able to find in clip art and PowerPoint. But and then I asked questions. How do you feel about Dr. Skeen changing the rules on you yet again from MLA to APA to real world? And so just part of the history there, on the first encounter with the penny principle, as you might remember, I think I talked about this. I had students, I just asked them, did you do MLA in high school? And almost everybody raises their hand. And then I say, well, guess what? We're going to do APA. And so we talk about that. And sometimes I ask them how they feel about that. And sometimes they're surprised or anxious, or sometimes folks might want to go with it, but and they're not bothered by it. But so we bring that conversation up again, just to remind them, really what we're focusing on is how to help people find sources. That's what the APA, or excuse me, the penny principle is all about. And then this is a different iteration of that. It's a real world iteration, the way that we often see. What strategy do you need to use to do well here? And then sometimes, I'm being a little bit facetious here. Hint, it starts with a P and rhymes with any principle. Sometimes I, will give them a little more time to think about what it is in case they've forgotten what the name of it is, because the name is important too, right? We've got to anchor any abstract thinking, any mindful abstraction we do to vocabulary so that it can be, pointed to and used. And so that's what I'm doing there. So that's basically what I do with the penny principle. There are lots of different things that could be done. I do have here, the episode's getting kind of long, so I might start to cut it short, but I just sat down and I thought, what could I do in the classroom with the penny principle? And I came up with 18 ideas for teaching it, and I've got them all listed here. Maybe I'll read through them briefly, and there could be any number of other things that could be done. We've already seen things like scenarios, brief questions and practice like that. Other times where they have mimicked examples. But number 1, introductory lesson toward the beginning of the semester. 2, application to references. 3, application to in-text citations. So, taking whatever principles we've worked with and applying them to whatever project they are working on. Application to the document layout. We saw a little bit of that tonight too. 5, review the steps for the penny principle by having students write them down. Sometimes, once again, these are 5 minutes. Sometimes you can combine them. Sometimes you can create a half-hour sequence of activities. Let's see, 6, find a penny, pick it up. Ask them to Google what citation format is common, insert major or career here, and find an example to copy down and follow later. 7, show them a layout and have them replicate it by drawing it. 8, have them choose a format based on their major. 9, workshop citations and material from their other classes. 10, show them a correct citation and have them copy it in full detail, reference or in-text citations. 11, what's the genre? Show them a piece of sample communication and ask them to find an appropriate penny. 12, show them some citations of sources from different genres, books, journal articles, newspapers, social media posts, court documents, etc. Have them look for commonalities or principles about that citation format. 13, show them examples of citations from different genres, including real-world genres, which sometimes don't use academic citation formats. 14, show them a citation and ask what the punctuation seems to indicate, what the format is trying to communicate to the reader. So there is one, I probably have it in my stack of things that I was just showing you, but I have them take a look at one and I ask them, well, what does the punctuation mean? If the period is being used there, what does that mean? Or if parentheses are being used, why are they typically being used? What is the format trying to communicate to the reader through symbols instead of words? That's another way for them to kind of pick up exposure and factual information about whatever the citation format is. 15, here's one. Hold a contest. Groups of students can leave early if they can correct the error-ridden list of citations you give them. So I've done one like that before. I've got another one in my stack somewhere. Maybe I can find it. Let me see here if you'll bear with me. Oh, here it is, the APA Citations Reference Page Contest. And so I've got different variations of this. This one has 5 that I ask them to find as a group. And I point them to a resource like the Purdue OWL or something like that. And I give them a bunch of different ones, a video, a document. This looks like a government document of some kind. New York Times Online, and a couple other ones. And so I give them different things to look at. And then criteria for judgment. Your team's page must look like a standard APA references page. Your page should look like the sample at the Purdue OWL. Looks like I've got a couple of options for pages there, or models that they could follow. Your team's page must have correct reference entries, and then post that in the week 7 discussion area. I can't remember now why I have 2. This seems kind of redundant. Your team's page must look like a standard APA references page. Use the APA resources in the Grand Canyon University style guides. And then I also have them look at a sample at the Purdue OWL. Maybe I was just giving them some options. That might have been what I was doing. They could go where they wanted. I just want them also to be aware of sources or resources that they could use. And so I probably gave them the option there for that and just didn't make it clear in this bit of text I have on the screen. And then, let's see. Then it asked them to include the names of their group mates and stuff as they turn that in. So there's something that kind of goes with that one I was just talking about, holding a contest. 16, reformat a citation in one format, such as MLA, to another, such as AMA. Have them name similarities and differences as they compare to examples of different formats you've given them. Show them different 18. Show them different ways to do in-text citations and have them copy samples down. And so lots of different ideas for teaching the penny principle there. So I'll go ahead and close it. This feels long to me. I don't know if it feels long to you, but it does to me. And just in the spirit of the penny principle, I have a bunch of citations here at the end of things that I've used in episode 21, parts 1 and 2. It looks like most of it probably was in episode 21, part 1. But anyway, thanks so much. I really appreciate my listeners. I appreciate having the opportunity to do this. I hope that it is useful to you. And if you would like to use the penny principle in your classes, I encourage you to do so. I really think that it is helpful, and it's doing some healthy things, with mindful abstraction, even on the part of the teacher, mindful abstraction. That's very healthy for the teacher to come up with some sort of strategy for students to use to help them understand how writing works a little bit better, and then give them lots of ways to practice it. All very healthy things in the classroom. So thank you so much. And I look forward to doing another episode in the near future. I hope your summer is going well, and I will be in touch again soon.